Great. The time for casual conversation has come to an end.
Well,
there'll be more time later.
yeah. So I've shared my screen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Synagogue Council of Massachusetts. Our program today is Coping with Uncertainty. עברנו את פרעה, נעבור גם את זה. We overcame Pharaoh, and we will overcome this too. Managing expectations, coping with uncertainty, and caring remotely. I would kindly ask you to mute your device if you have not already done so. Our program today, Coping with Uncertainty, is intended to provide a safe place to share our current challenges. It's organized in 3 parts. After my introduction, Rabbi Beth Nadich will provide some research-based content about our responses to crisis. Elements of this presentation may resonate with last week's CJP program with Professors Muli Lahad and Ruby Rugel. Our goal today is to use this as both a foundation and a launch pad for the second part of our program, during which she will be sent to breakout rooms to participate in facilitated small group conversations. The third part of the program will bring us back together to wrap up and enjoy some sacred sources. I'm abundantly grateful to Rabbis Beth Nadich and Dick Rudnick, who helped to frame this program, to Beth for helping us to understand this experience by providing context and education, and to Beth, Shoshana Savage, Dick Rudnick, and Judy Krumer for facilitating our breakout room experiences. We will be recording the portions of our program when we are all together. Breakout room conversations will not be recorded. It's now my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Beth Nadich. Ordained by JTS in 1999, Rabbi Nadich currently serves as an ACPE certified educator at Hebrew Senior Life, teaching the art and skills of spiritual care to future clergy and others who are dedicated to geriatric spiritual care. She has a particular interest in trauma-informed care, having served as a chaplain after 9/11 in New York, after the Boston Marathon bombing in Boston, and alongside the Jewish community of Pittsburgh after the Tree of Life synagogue shooting on October 27, 2018. She teaches widely in the Boston Jewish community and beyond. Rabbi Nadich is also the co-author and editor of Halalim Nafshi, a siddur for elementary-aged children and youth. Rabbi Nadich, her husband, and 3 sons live in Newton. Beth, the program is now yours. You need to unmute.
Okay, wonderful. Now can people hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So for some reason, I can't totally see everybody. It's my Zoom is doing something different than it does when other people share screens. So bear with me. I'm going to try to get as many of you as possible so that I can see you. Could we have the next slide, please? So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is really that there is no us and them when it comes to disaster. We are in a situation where very often we think, well, I'm the caregiver for somebody else. And so therefore, I'm the one offering care. And in fact, in this sort of a situation, we ourselves are dealing with exactly the same crisis and exactly the same trauma that any of those that we care for are, whether we're rabbis or educators or social workers or family members or anyone in any kind of helping profession, or, and I'll broaden this a little bit, anybody who cares for anyone in your family or group of friends. I first got into looking at trauma and trauma-informed care out of an experience of communal tragedy that I myself experienced. When I was in my my Israel year of rabbinical school, it was 1995, 1996, And two of my classmates, one of my classmates and his fiance, were killed in a bus bombing and a terrorist attack. And it was the first time that I had been in a situation like that where I was receiving care, and the people who are providing the care were also significantly impacted by Matt and Sarah's deaths. And it was another situation where in Jerusalem at that time, it was dangerous at times to go out and to ride buses because there was a whole rash of bus bombings at that time. And I came back from that year reeling, really not knowing what to do or where to go or how to do this. And I realized, you know, I'm in rabbinical school. I really better figure this out. I need to understand how to care for other people the way that I was cared for. And that's when I first signed up for my chaplaincy training. And then that brought me into all the other things that Gretchen just read in my bio. So I tell you that not to be depressing about terrorism, but to say that
Walk out.
my training in this really came from a place of communal disaster. Could I ask everyone to put your microphone on mute?
I'm just listening to this.
I think it might be somebody named
our
Linda
holidays
who
in the
might
pandemic.
not be on mute. Okay. Or if the host could just mute everybody and I will unmute myself. Okay, great. There is no us and them when it comes to disaster. Could I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to share with you a number of sacred sources, and the sacred sources really come from a whole variety of places. I'm defining sacred source as any source which feels sacred to you. It might bring you comfort, sustenance, or a sense of awe. It can be text, music, nature, poetry, children's books, images, humor, something not mentioned here because everyone has their own sense of the sacred. Could you go forward 2 slides, actually? Oh, here's where I want. Okay, so the first sacred source that I wanted to share with you actually comes from a source which is very near and dear to my heart, which is The West Wing. For those of you who are not familiar with the TV show, I highly, highly recommend it. And this is just a 30-second clip of Jed Bartlett, hold on one second, Jed Bartlett, who is the president, talking about how he feels about stress. Okay, go ahead. I think you might need to share the sound on the share screen. You know what? It's an 18-second clip. What he says basically is, stress is for other people. When I hear the word stress, he says, I think about, you know, taking a bubble bath or something like that. That's not what I need. I'm not somebody who feels stress. That is how some of us actually approach stress. Stress is for other people. I can handle it. Some others of us approach stress in the following way. Next slide. I think I need one more, actually. Is there a cartoon in the next? Here we go. Some of us, instead of, you know, poo-pooing stress, might feel like this sacred source, which is this cartoon that I love, where the cupcake is saying to everybody, find your center, but the poor donut, just, how do you find your center when it just feels like everything that you have always relied on is missing? It's just gone. And I would say that those are the 2 poles of where so many of us have found ourselves during this time of COVID. Either saying, well, it's okay, it's not bothering me, I'm taking the opportunity to do this and I don't feel stressed. Or this other pole of, I don't even know where to begin because I have entirely lost my center. So what I'd like to do with you now, before we go into breakout groups, is to contextualize a little bit of this in terms of a little bit of trauma theory and in terms of the research on disaster chaplaincy. Next slide, please. One of my favorite quotes from Rachel Naomi Remen, if you haven't read her book, Kitchen Table Wisdom or My Grandfather's Blessings, please do. She is a physician who herself has suffered from very severe Crohn's disease from early teenagehood. And she just writes beautifully and brings all of this together. The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. Just a show of hands, has anybody felt like you're getting kind of wet over the last 5 months? Hands, smiles, nods. Yeah, okay, great. And that's what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. So when we are in the realm of disaster, it impacts us in 5 main realms: cognitively, emotionally, socially, physically, and spiritually. I think we all probably understand that disaster might impact us emotionally, so I'm not really gonna go into that. I'm sure we understand how it's impacted us socially over this time in COVID, and even physically. But the 2 areas that I do wanna mention, because I think they're overlooked, are cognitively and spiritually. Next slide, please. When we start feeling these feelings of unrest and dis-ease, our minds, our bodies, and our souls are having expected responses to an unexpected situation. We are literally hardwired to feel activated in a variety of different ways. Literally, this comes from evolution, and there's some great neuroscience on this. What we are feeling right now is normal, even though it makes us feel completely outside the realm of normal. Next slide, please. Cognitively, I'm not sure if you have realized this at any point. You may have been experiencing difficulty in making decisions, or trouble in thinking clearly, or maybe not being able to focus as well. Perhaps you're distracted easily or feeling off, or maybe you actually have really sharp perception. Has anybody experienced anything like that over the last couple of months? Seeing a couple of nods. Anybody feel comfortable sharing a moment of that or an experience? I can't see everybody at the same time. I saw Jennifer and Jessica waving your hands. Jessica, do you want to share a moment?
Just the sense that if I have to make a choice between whether to do something or do something else, I find myself often unable to make a rapid decision, whereas normally it wouldn't be a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is so, I understand that you're also a trauma specialist, and this is just so typical for a time like this, when even if we ourselves don't feel like we are being actively traumatized, the very fact of living in crisis is causing this sort of thing. Jennifer, do you want to say something as well? You don't have to.
Here we go, trying to unmute. Hi, Beth.
Hi.
Yeah, so I find that I'm really able to make decisions and choices that impact for other people. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm cooking for my dad, I can decide what to eat. But if I'm making a decision for myself, I can't do it. So I feel like I've kicked into this like care about other people gear, mm-hmm. but I just can't open the door to caring about myself, like self-care.
Yeah. And you're in good company. I understand. I mean, for me, one of the things that happens is that I spend all of my concentrating muscle at work all day, and then I leave my little attic retreat up here, and I go downstairs and open up the refrigerator to try to make dinner, and I stare at it for 10 minutes sometimes. It's just beyond me to make a decision about whether it's going to be broccoli or cauliflower or something else, because we've all used our muscles of concentration, we just have access to less of it right now. Next slide, please. The other one that I really want to focus on here, and I imagine that you do too if you came to a Synagogue Council event, is how crisis, and specifically this crisis, is impacting us spiritually. By spiritually, I don't mean religiously, although I think we've all had religious effects. And the two things that I really want to focus on are trust and uncertainty. And I'd like to frame both of those as a spiritual sense of crisis right now. As human beings, we crave order, we crave meaning, we crave hope. We are, as some have said, meaning-making creatures. And we are at a time when we need order desperately, and we just don't have it. It's not only not possible right now, but it doesn't even seem achievable. We are in the middle of a pandemic where there are no certainties. There's no cure. There's not yet an effective treatment. We don't know how long it'll last. We don't know where it lurks. You know all of this. And that adds this heavy, sort of wet blanket to all of us that we're carrying around all the time. And I imagine that when we come out of this, that we'll feel, no pun intended here, that we're going to be unmuted in some sense. that we'll be able to really expand into who we know we are. But at the moment, we're all carrying around this crisis of uncertainty that's connected to a spiritual crisis of trust. One of the hallmarks of trauma is that when trauma happens, our assumptions can be shattered. This comes out of the work of Ronnie Janoff-Bullman, that we have a lack of control, and the degree to which trauma impacts us is one thing that determines that is the level of powerlessness that we feel. And so many institutions and ideas that we have relied on as Americans, it turns out, may not be there from the 21st century idea that medicine actually is effective and can cure things, and that there's always there's an app for that, and there might be a drug for that. Not necessarily. To the fact that rain, snow, sleet, or hail, the mail's going to come. We can't depend on that right now. And so our assumptions about the way that life works in an ordered way have really been shattered. And so we are carrying around, all of us in the world are carrying around these challenges to our spiritual lives with uncertainty and trust and identity. We may not recognize ourselves either physically or in terms of our roles that we usually take, and belonging as well. Next slide, please. It's not all bad news. Spiritually, we also might be experiencing a heightened sense of compassion for other people, or renewed sense of faith, or a deepened sense of purpose. And sometimes it's hard to find those things. It's a lot of up and down. Next slide. So I'd like to share this with you, and then after this, we're gonna break into some breakout rooms. What you're looking at in front of you is a chart of the emotional life cycle of a disaster, the emotional and spiritual life cycle of a disaster. This comes out of the research from disaster chaplaincy and disaster social work. And it goes through the phases of what a disaster looks like. How many of you, raise your hand for more than a second, were at the event the other day that Gretchen was talking about? Anyone? No, okay. Can you see my cursor here? No, okay. Let me see if I can annotate. I know how to do this when I am doing it. Okay, well, I'm gonna just ask you to imagine my finger moving along this lovely magenta line. So, thanks. So in a normal disaster, and I'm gonna say normal with quotes a few times, and then I'm just gonna stop using the air quotes.
Beth, I just made you a co-host, so you may be able to do it now.
That's very exciting. Okay. No, because I'm viewing, it looks like I'm viewing her screen. So that's okay. You'll just imagine and it'll be fine.
But now we can see your cursor for some reason, Beth.
Great. Okay, here I am. Okay, this is me. This is so exciting. Flexibility is so much fun. So in a quote unquote normal disaster, there's a pre-disaster phase, which usually comes with a warning and a threat of the disaster, and then the impact of the disaster. So what does that mean? This can be anything from the meteorologist telling us that there's a hurricane coming and people need to board up their windows or evacuate. Or, you know, it used to be go rush to the supermarket and buy everything you can, but now we don't really do that anymore. To the oxygen mask dropping on a plane, you know, that's the kind that you don't really want to get, to really anything else. And there is this warning and a threat period, which leads to impact. Impact is usually one impact. The hurricane hits, the bomb goes off, the community member dies, the leader dies. I don't want to go through all the disasters in the world because it's just profoundly depressing, but just know that usually what happens is that the impact hits and then it has hit. From that time, we go into this heroic phase, and you probably recognized this. This is after the marathon bombing, people who had just run the marathon running into the medical tents to help because they were ER physicians who just happened to also be marathon runners. This is after Hurricane Harvey in Houston, people going out in boats to rescue people who were stranded in their suburban neighborhoods. This is at the beginning of COVID. I don't know if you experienced this. Every single Jewish organization and arts organization and other organization getting everything online immediately to make sure that, God forbid, we were in our homes and did not have access to opera or lectures or something else. And it all came out at once. And that was a way of joining together in a heroic effort. Hey, this is going to impact us. Let's all come together. And so we did. Now, I want to make sure to say this is a communal chart. This is not an individual's response to disaster. This is a community response to disaster. So then we get to the honeymoon phase here. This is after the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting that the blood banks were flooded with donations. This is, we're all in this pandemic together, and here we are, and we can, at least we can, if we're experiencing a disaster, we can be unified about it. This is community cohesion. From here to here lasts between 1 to 3 days to 1 to 3 weeks in a normal disaster. 1 to 3 days to 1 to 3 weeks. Just hold on to that for a second. I'm going to try to look through and see your responses or reactions to this. And that's a normal disaster. And then we hit this other stage. You can see it's a lot longer. From here to here, the end of this reconstruction path is usually 1 to 3 years. So it's at this point, as I start to tell people about this, that I find one of two reactions. One of them is, and I see Judy Coomer saying this, oh my God, that's horrifying. And I hear other people saying, well, at least there's a path. At least I know that we're on a path somewhere. And we can all go back and forth between those. So I would say if we were in a normal disaster, we'd be somewhere around here right now. Somewhere around here. For the following reason. This is not a normal disaster. We have been living in layers and layers of impact, which keep repeating over and over. There's a dangerous virus in China. It has spread to Italy. There's a nursing home in Seattle that has cases of coronavirus, and we don't know how it spreads. Wait, New York is overrun. There was a Biogen conference, and people lived in Wellesley and all over the place. And then people started getting sick and people started dying. That's another impact. And then March 13th, we all went on lockdown. And just imagine that we're in this spiral right now of warning, threat, impact, warning, threat, impact, warning, threat, impact. And we're tired. At least I am. I'm not going to speak for you. I'm tired because the impact keeps coming. And that's where we go back to that question of uncertainty. We don't know when the impacts are going to stop coming. We have hope for when the impacts are going to stop coming, but it's just not at all clear. So that leaves us in this constant state of disillusionment. And you'll notice it goes pretty far down. And there's peaks and valleys to it. So burn this into your brain a little bit. I want to make one other comment, which is that you'll notice that the pre-disaster part up here, whoever made the chart sort of put it in a little above, we're doing well as a society. Not even halfway down, and not we're doing poorly as a society. But this COVID situation came at the end of a very tumultuous number of years, or maybe in the middle of. And it doesn't matter what your politics are, whether it's climate change or politics or racial unrest or pretty much anything that's been going on for a while. We as a society and community didn't start off here. We kind of started off down here. So again, even in a normal disaster, there's just nothing normal about this. We can play unprecedented bingo later if you'd like. Let's go on to the next slide. And with this, I want to talk about it a little bit, and then I think we're going to break into breakout groups. That entire disillusionment phase is about grief. It's all about grief and loss. It's about mourning what used to be normal and isn't anymore. It's about trying to adjust to what life looks like now. It's about recognizing those things that might not feel so tangible, but are actual real losses in our lives. And I'm going to throw a couple more terms at you, and then we're going to go into breakout groups so we can really hear each other talk a bit about this. Disenfranchised grief is grief where the loss itself or the style of grieving or the griever is not recognized. And especially those of us who care for other people, and again, you'll notice that my definition of that is really broad, from helping professions to anybody in a family or in a community. We're really good at disenfranchising our own grief by saying, you know, I shouldn't complain because at least nobody died, or I'm safe. And there are absolutely issues of privilege here, without question. But it doesn't matter what level of privilege you have. It doesn't matter what race, creed, religion, any of the gender, any of the categories that we have. If you break your ankle, it's a broken ankle. And loss is loss. So when I talk about this myself, I sometimes talk about watching my son miss his last year of high school and having to have a really different kind of graduation, which we weren't sure was going to happen. I talk about the fact that I miss singing with people desperately. There are a lot of other losses of people. There's also the loss of, I like grocery shopping, but I'm in a high risk category, so I don't go into grocery stores. I would love some, crunchy okra snacks from Trader Joe's that I just read about, but I'm not going to be going to Trader Joe's for the near future. It might not be a big loss, but it's a loss. There are also hidden sufferers out there, people who might be not necessarily want to be public about the things that they're grieving because it might be about private medical information. Somebody who has a chronic illness, but they can pass for healthy, and so they've never actually had to tell anybody about it before, but now they're really confined to their homes because their lives are in danger. Expectations of heroism. Not everybody is going to be a frontline worker, but we're all heroes in different way, and there's layers of losses. So with that, I'd like to split us into breakout groups, although I'm not going to do the actual splitting. And there's some questions for people to think about just in smaller groups, so you have more airtime, about what does it mean to live during this time? What are some of the losses that you're experiencing? And how can we express them and hold them for each other so that as we begin Elul tonight, we can try to live alongside of them. Gretchen, I will move this over to you.
So honestly, we had assigned everyone to their own breakout rooms, but we're having a technological glitch. And so I think what's going to happen is you're going to find yourself randomly assigned. And for that, I deeply apologize.
That's okay.
So, okay. Oh, open all rooms. No, it looks like the system's going to work.
Okay.
It should be open.
Great. So you should join the breakout room that it is asking you to join. And if you could unshare, that would be great. So we
Unshare. Okay, great.
And everybody sort of pops back in and out. And I feel either like we're on Star Trek and we're materializing, or like we're in the middle of Harry Potter and apparating. So is everyone back?
I have everyone back. According to the numbers, we're all back.
Okay, that is terrific. So we have about another 18 minutes or so to think about what now, what next. So if Jermaine, if you could put the slideshow back on, although if you could bring us actually to that first to the first slide that says weathering the storm. Keep going up. Yep, here we go. Oh, right there. So, as we're finishing our time together, I want to learn 2 Jewish texts with you and share a couple of other sacred sources. Some of the literature talks about how people develop a resource caravan, and I love that language. I also like sacred source. So this is a section from the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Yevamot, and I'm going to sort of translate it into more understandable English as we go along. Rabban Gamliel said, "Once I was traveling on a boat, and from a distance I saw a boat that shattered and sank. and I was grieved over the apparent death of the Torah scholar who was on board. Who was it? Rabbi Akiva. But when I disembarked onto dry land, Rabbi Akiva came and sat and taught me some Jewish law. I said to him, "My son, who brought you up from the water?" And he said to me, "A duff from the boat came to me, and I bent my head before each and every wave that came. And the waves did not wash me off of this duff, and I reached the shore." So I'm not translating the word duff here, but I'll tell you the two things it could mean. In this text, it refers to the plank of a boat. So holding on to, some of the shattered boat, and he's holding on until it brings him to shore. The other meaning of daf is a page of Talmud. So I'm so inspired by this text, where the way that Rabbi Akiva survives a boat wreck is that he holds on to something that keeps him afloat. And physically, it could be a raft. Emotionally, metaphorically, spiritually, he's holding on to something that gives him strength and sustenance. And he just rides that until it brings him slowly and gradually to shore. And that's what it feels like to me these days, that we've just been in the midst of a shipwreck. Anybody looking at us and seeing this from shore might say, "Oh my goodness, how would anybody survive that?" And yet here we are. It's August, it's not March, it's August 19th, and we all seem to have grabbed onto something to get us here. If you could skip to the, just go through quickly and I'll tell you when to stop. Sorry for people's dizziness. Okay. This comes from Shelley Rambo, who's a theologian at BU. She wrote an incredible Christian book about trauma. And in a conversation I had with her sometime in late March, early April, she said to me, "Beth, this is just too much for anyone to carry or to bear." And so every morning I wake up and I ask myself, what can I carry today? What can I carry today? The long range planning of the world may be completely beyond us, but we can say to ourselves, what can I carry today? Can you go forward one slide? I love this poem, but I'm not going to read it to you right now. I just take a moment to sort of absorb it and take it in. It's called Heavy by Mary Oliver. And for us right now, as we're in this time, what can we carry today? So just take a moment to read, and then we'll go on to another piece. It's not the weight you carry, but how you carry it. Books, bricks, grief, it's all in the way you embrace it, balance, and carry it. I saw a meme on Facebook the other day that said, just because you can carry it doesn't mean it's not heavy. I keep thinking about that. We're all carrying it, but it's pretty heavy. Can you go forward one slide, please? So here's where I have three more things that I want to share with you. And they're all sacred sources. One of them is music. One of them is visual, is an image, and one of them is a Jewish text. So I think I'm going to share this one with you because it also connects into a loss that I myself had and a way that some people were able to transform it. 2 of my kids are in the Hazamir choir, and so much of their lives is centered around singing, and it's an incredibly talented group of 400 kids who usually come together in March and sing in Lincoln Center together, 400. And it was one of the first things to be canceled, and it was really a loss in our family. But 2 chapters of the group got together to sing this song from the repertoire that they were supposed to have performed this year, and I think it's really relevant to us right now. It's this is a chapter of kids from Baltimore and from Ashkelon, and the song is Gesher. You might recognize the words. The world is a very narrow bridge, and the main thing is not to be afraid. The actual translation of the actual Hebrew in this that Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav said is, the world is a very narrow bridge, and the main thing is not to be paralyzed by fear. But it's not the most popular translation, it's just the accurate one. But hang on to that as you listen to this. Oh, I hope we can hear it.
כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל.
To my left and to my right, the jaws of the abyss, like twinkling teeth, I chart my course. Fear singing in my ears. To my left and to my right, the jaws of the abyss, like twinkling teeth, I chart my course. Fear singing in my ears. To my left and to my right, the jaws of the abyss, like twinkling teeth, I chart my course. Fear singing in my ears. To my left and to my right, the jaws of the abyss, like twinkling teeth, I chart my course. Fear singing in my ears. How can I be safe on a narrow bridge? How can I be strong till the day I die? How can I be safe on a narrow bridge? How can I be strong till the day I die?
Don't look down,
Keep going,
don't look down,
keep growing,
don't look down,
keep moving. Don't look down,
keep going,
don't look down,
keep growing,
don't look down, keep moving.
don't look down, keep going, don't look down, keep growing, don't look down, keep moving. All around is a very narrow path, but the most important thing is not to be afraid. לא לפחד כלל. All around is a very narrow path, but the most important thing is not to be afraid. לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו גשר.
Yeah. So I'd like to end with this, with one more sacred source that'll bring us into the month of Elul, which is starting tonight, which brings us directly into the Yamim Noraim, the high holidays. Another sacred source for me is friends who learn together. And so this is my dear friend, Rabbi Rob Scheinberg, and it's his interpretation on the verse from Eicha, from Lamentations, that's put into our high holiday liturgy and our regular liturgy. Just the tunes that we sing for it differ depending on the season. So the translation, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh Yameinu Kikedem. Return us, God, to you, and we will return. Renew our days as you renewed our days in earlier times. So there is a midrash on the word kedem, which is the last word here, that it doesn't mean ancient times. It means east. So if you know Yama Vakedma, Safona Vanegba, it's the east. So this midrash says, renew our lives as you renewed our lives after we were exiled from the Garden of Eden. Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem is not a plea for a restoration of a formerly perfect condition, but rather a plea for resilience, a plea for the ability to renew ourselves after future crises and dislocations, just as our lives have been renewed before. As Elie Wiesel said, God gave Adam a secret, and that secret was not how to begin, but how to begin again. How to begin again. So don't return us to exactly the way things were. Teach us how to get through that next phase, that 1 to 3 year disillusionment and recovery and rebuilding. Teach us how to find our own resources, our own sacred sources, and begin again. So I'd like to leave you with an image, if you could go there. This is a tree outside Newbridge on the Charles, which is where I used to spend most of my days before I moved into my attic in March. And I used to pass this tree every day on the way walking between independent living and assisted living. And in the fall, it's gorgeous. And one day I kept saying, oh, I should take a picture. I should take a picture because it's so beautiful. But the morning that I got there and finally remembered to take a picture, I arrived and discovered that there had been a windstorm the night before. And you can see all of the leaves that used to be on this beautiful tree up here are all here because the wind just blew them all down. And I was so sad that the beauty of the tree that I had hoped to be able to visit with was gone. And then I looked more closely and I realized there are these leaves that are still hanging on up here. And there's a whole layer here that is still hanging on and still beautiful. And I stood in front of this tree for probably half an hour. And the longer I stood there, the more I realized this is really a metaphor for resilience. This is when the windstorm comes, some of us are going to get blown down. Some of us are going to hang on and we're going to feel like we're the only ones. Some of us are going to stay with other people if we're lucky and to be able to stay in community. And ultimately, all of the leaves are going to blow down. Next slide, please. But then I went to visit the tree again in the spring and I saw this. This is the same tree. And it gave me some hope. So if you could unshare everything for a minute so we can see everyone's faces. So I really want to thank all of you for both coming and those people who facilitated for facilitating. And as we head into Elul and as we head into the high holidays and as we continue to march through this very strange time of ours, that we each find our own sources of strength and that we can find strength in each other even if we're not physically with each other. And I want to wish everybody what may be perhaps your first Shana Tova.
Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you.
Amen to everything you said. I have some thank yous also. We are abundantly grateful to you, Beth, for teaching us so very much today. We're also grateful to you and to Rabbi Judy Coomer and to Rabbi Dick Rudnick and to Shoshana Savitz for facilitating our conversations during the breakout rooms. Thank you to Emma Savitz, our office administrator, for facilitating our registration process and supporting the Zoom event. Thank you to Jermaine Wong for vital tech support. Thank you to our board of directors for their enduring support. And we're so very grateful to each of you for your support, your interest, your participation, and the precious gift of your time. Please look for our program evaluation. It should be in your inbox sometime this afternoon. And we hope that you, your loved ones, your community members are and remain healthy. Best wishes for a good, sweet, and healthy New Year. Shana Tova Umetuka. Thank you.
This was great.
Tova. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.